Alright, welcome to episode 2 of Chatting to AI. Last episode I had a short introduction and then talked about some problems that I'd had with walking. And this time we're going to start off with something that also, well, it didn't come from walking, I'd already had it before, but it has cleared up since I talked about this. We're also going to talk about, I had, at the time that I wrote this, or the day that I asked these questions, there was some questions of, I think in Reddit, I use Reddit quite a bit, they were talking about the bond market, so I was asking about the bond market. They gave me some information about that, and then I was also asking about colonoscopies in New Zealand, because my brother had recently had to pay for a colonoscopy in New Zealand, due to being under the age that it's available. And then also I was asking about lactose intolerance in Asian people. So let's go through with it and see what it is. And also I put these videos to video footage of myself walking. I tend to walk every day, and I find that if I put that to that, at least you get to see something that's sort of local to me and a bit more interesting than just looking at my face, which I think would be pretty boring, to be honest. So that's why I have those videos of me walking. And hopefully as the seasons change, it'll start being like there'll be snow, and maybe I'll be walking during the snow, or at the moment it's fall, so there's lots of leaves dropping everywhere, and sometimes I come across local wildlife like a bunch of deer and things like that, so hopefully it'll get a little bit more interesting on that side as well. Alright, so let's get into it. First thing I asked ChatGPT on this particular day was, why do people get psoriasis? I feel like I have a small patch on the outer side of my ankle. It said, psoriasis is a chronic autoimmune condition that causes skin cells to build up rapidly, leading to scaly, itchy, and sometimes painful patches. It can show up in small areas like the outer ankle, elbows, knees, or on people's scalp. It may come and go over time. It then said it's a mix of genetics, immune system malfunction, and environmental triggers. The first thing was genetics. If you have a family history of psoriasis, your risk goes up. I think I do. My aunt seems to have psoriasis on her arms. Even if your parents didn't have it, you may still carry the genes. Immune system. Psoriasis is autoimmune. Your body mistakenly attacks healthy skin cells, causing inflammation and rapid skin turnover. The triggers for psoriasis are stress, skin injury like scratches, sunburns, friction from shoes, infections, especially strep throat, cold, dry weather. I live in a cold, dry climate most of the time. Certain medications like beta blockers and lithium, hormonal changes, or smoking or alcohol. The spot in my ankle. If you have a small, dry, rough, or a slightly red patch on your ankle, it could be psoriasis, especially if it's symmetrical or has a silvery scale. Other possibilities include eczema, fungal infection like ringworm, contact dermatitis, or keratosis pilaris. What you can do, try a thick moisturizer like CeraVe, Aquaphor, or something with urea. Avoid picking or scratching the spot. If it persists or spreads, see a doctor, preferably a dermatologist that may confirm psoriasis, or other options like topical steroids, vitamin D creams, or maybe oral medication if you need it. The problem on my ankle seems to have gone away since I've lost more and more weight and I've been walking frequently, which is good for me, but I did put some cream on it, but I don't think it really was psoriasis in my case. It might have just been some sort of like contact dermatitis like it said. Okay, the next question I had for it was that at the time the US government was talking about the bond market, and several financial analysts were talking about how the bond market is was exploding or something at that time, and it could collapse, and I wanted to know what would be the implications if it did crash. So it said, I said, what happens if the bond market crashes? And it said, if the bond market crashes, it can have widespread consequences across the entire financial system for governments, businesses, investors, and everyday people. Here's a breakdown of what that really means. What is a bond market crash? A crash usually means bond prices fall sharply and suddenly, which causes yields, otherwise known as interest rates, to spike. Remember, bond prices down equals yields go up. This can happen due to sudden inflation spikes, aggressive interest rate hikes, sovereign debt fears, i.e. if investors think a country might default, mass selling by large holders, for instance, banks or other foreign governments. What happens next? Interest rates skyrocket. When bond yields rise, borrowing gets more expensive. Mortgages, car loans, and business loans all become pricier. This often slows down the economy and can tip into recession. Number 2. Stock market often falls too. Stocks compete with bonds. When bond yields jump, investors shift out of stocks. Higher interest rates also hurt company profits, especially for growth companies. Number 3. Governments pay more to borrow. Governments fund deficits by issuing bonds. A crash means that they would have to pay higher interest rates to attract buyers. That could lead to higher taxes, spending cuts, or even austerity in extreme cases. Number 4. Pensions and retirement funds lose value. Many retirement plans hold bonds for stability. A crash can hurt these portfolios, impacting retirees or future retirees. Number 5. Currency may be affected. If foreign investors sell a country's bonds, the currency could weaken. This can fuel imported inflation. Bad if the country relies on imports. A real-world example. In the UK in 2022, a mini crash in the bond market triggered by government tax cuts without funding caused a spike in bond yields, also known as gilts, pension funds teetering on collapse, and emergency intervention by the Bank of England to stabilise markets. Can governments or central banks stop it? Yes, temporarily. Central banks can buy bonds, also known as quantitative easing, cut interest rates, or provide emergency liquidity to prevent broader financial collapse. But these tools come with trade-offs like higher inflation or currency devaluation. A too long didn't read is, if the bond market crashes, borrowing becomes expensive, stocks may fall, pensions take a hit, governments may struggle to fund debt, a recession is more likely. Then I asked it what the maximum age for a regular colonoscopy in New Zealand was, because I was born in New Zealand, I live in Canada, I've had to have a colonoscopy for, the doctor just offered it to me because I was getting a different type of scan, which is done around the same time. That turned up that I am 45 now. I had it when I was about 43, I think. And after my colonoscopy, they found a bunch of these polyps that were sort of not cancerous, but could develop into cancer. The typical time that you would have a colonoscopy in Canada might be between 50 and 55, and the doctor said that if I'd waited essentially, then I could have well had bowel cancer or colon cancer by the time that I actually had gone to see them to have the colonoscopy done. So then I passed that information on to my brother, who's a couple of years younger than me, and he found that his doctor wouldn't do it due to his age. ChatGPT says, in New Zealand, the public national bowel screening program, which uses fit kits followed by colonoscopy if needed. A fit kit is like they test your poop for blood, is available free for individuals aged 60 to 74 years. It is now being expanded down to 58 years, but the upper limit remains at 74 years. What about older adults? If you're age 74 and over, you're no longer eligible for free routine screening under the national program, but you can still have a colonoscopy if there is a medical indication such as symptoms like bleeding or change in bowel habits, personal or family history of polyps or bowel cancer, other clinical risk factors. However, even if you have personal or family history, that will not get you one if you're under the age of 58, as my brother found out. He had my results, he had my father's results, who also had bowel cancer, a lower version, but still had bowel cancer, and one of our grandfathers passed away from bowel cancer. All that wasn't enough. Because he was younger than the minimum age, he had to pay, and he had to pay around $3,000 of his own money just to get colonoscopy. So that was pretty interesting. And then the next thing that I asked about was, how come Koreans can eat so much dairy, but most Asian people are lactose intolerant? It said, that's a really interesting observation, and you're right. While most East Asians have high rates of lactose intolerance, many South Koreans seem to tolerate dairy better, especially given how common things like milk, cheese, and yogurt are in modern Korean diets. Here's why. Most East Asians are lactose intolerant, around 70 to 100%. I don't think it's 100% because I've met a lot of East Asians that can eat dairy normally, albeit they're in Canada. Around 70 to 100% of East Asian adults lose the ability to digest lactose, the sugar in the milk, after childhood. This is because the lactase enzyme, which breaks down lactose, naturally declines with age in most populations globally. South Korea's rising dairy tolerance is relatively recent. While Koreans historically had low dairy consumption and high lactose intolerance in the last 50 to 70 years, a few key things have changed. A. Dietary changes post-Korean War. After the war, the US and UN heavily influenced Korea's food programs. Powdered milk and other dairy products were introduced to school lunch programs starting in the 1950s and 60s. This led to widespread dairy exposure at a young age. B. Microbiome adaptation and early exposure. Repeated early exposure to dairy may help train the gut microbiome to tolerate lactose better over time. Even without full lactase persistence, fermented dairy like yogurt is also easier to digest and more common in Korea. C. Lactose-free or low-lactose dairy is common. Korean food manufacturers often adapt dairy to be more tolerable, i.e. with lactose-reduced milk. People also consume probiotic-rich foods such as kimchi and yogurt, which can improve digestion. D. Possible genetic microvariation. There may be slightly lower rates of lactose intolerance in Koreans compared to other East Asians like Chinese and Japanese, but it is still high overall. Some estimates suggest about 75 to 80% of Koreans are lactose intolerant, yet they still eat dairy because they have adapted socially and biologically. So the too long didn't read is, most Koreans are technically still lactose intolerant, but early childhood exposure through school milk programs, use of yogurt and fermented dairy, changes in gut bacteria, and modern adaptations like lactose-free products all combine to help them tolerate dairy better than most other East Asian populations. Now, I have lactose intolerance, and so does my wife, who is Asian, or East Asian, and so does my daughter. My wife and my daughter, their lactose intolerance is far, far worse than myself. I have something called partial lactose intolerance, which means I get like if they eat something with dairy in it, and lactose, they will end up getting smelly gas and then diarrhea fairly soon after eating it. I can eat a bunch of it and I will get that gas maybe later on in the day, and then I may get diarrhea the next day, depending on if I have ice cream or full on milk or something like that. But I think it's pretty interesting that there is some sort of delayed reaction for some people, and then a very fast reaction for others. So that was the things that I asked on this particular day to ChatGPT and the answers that it gave. If you're enjoying this, continue to watch or to listen, and please subscribe if you're interested.